Outbreak Perfected, the successor to the much-loved Outbreak Prime of Destiny 1. Bungie Ninja dropped this gun into the game yesterday, and the community had the quest figured out within 6 hours of the quest becoming available. You start by grabbing a fallen transceiver, you go to the 4 locations on Earth and 2 on Nessus, head to the farm basement to have a quick chat with Mithrax, and run the new Whisper-style 0-hour mission. Dado's made an excellent guide on doing the quest step by step, and you can find a link in the description below. Now that we are starting to see this gun more and more, I wanted to take some time with it in PvP and PvP to see if it lives up to its predecessor. The most notable change with Outbreak Perfected is that the original exotic and intrinsic perk, the Corruption Spreads and Virulence, which handled the multi-burst and precision kill nanite swarms, have been combined into one intrinsic perk, and the new perk called Parasitism has been added, which increases damage based on the number of nanites attached to the target. Also, the Catalyst effect adds an extra layer to the intrinsic perk by creating more nanite swarms when an enemy is killed by another swarm. All of these perks sound very helpful in PvE, but PvP-wise, there's not much in the perks department besides Outlaw. Taking it into Crucible, it was quickly noticeable that this gun was not comfortable there. Overall, it's a solid pulse rifle, and it's certainly usable. However, there are better options that are not exotic, which frees up an exotic slot for something more fit for Crucible. Some key issues I noticed were the damage is not fantastic, requiring more bursts, and for a pulse rifle this weapon has some pretty bad range. This is likely to balance the gun considering the nanite swarm, however, you will seldom see this proc in Crucible outside of headshots, and even then the perk's usefulness is quite limited compared to PvE. You're going to find yourself getting outgunned and outranged by most people running Go Figure or Blast Furnace with a decent roll, and especially if they're running a kill clip outlaw type roll. Even a 3-round burst pulse like Right Side of Wrong with a solid roll will likely win in a gunfight, mainly due to how hard the damage fall off is for this weapon once it's out of its range. If I were to guesstimate the effective range of this weapon, I would imagine it's more in line with the 150 hand cannons, and that puts this gun at a decent disadvantage. To be honest, I mostly expected this, since in Destiny this was sort of the same case. I will say that the gun feels notably weaker than its Destiny predecessor, which is a shame since, for a while in Rise of Iron, it was my go-to pulse rifle for Crucible. Unfortunately, I wanted to switch back to my Luna's Howl or Recluse instead of using Outbreak Perfected, even though it should technically be a better choice for the ranges I was engaging at. If I had to pick a single exotic I would rather have in my primary slot for PvP, I would end up choosing Ace, since I feel these two weapons could fight at the same ranges, and the Ace would probably come out on top. To try out the gun in PvE, I took it into Gambit Prime since there are a ton of grouped up weak enemies and frequent bullet sponges, which means this gun should shine here. Outbreak Perfected did a pretty good job, and its issues with range and damage were mostly corrected since you could use the perk's effects more frequently, and you don't have to be so concerned about range as you do in PvP. The nanite swarm does a very solid amount of damage against trash mobs, and combined with the catalyst, this gun will be a daisy chain of death. For the primeval, the nanites added a nice extra layer of damage, especially once you started building up nanites for the exotic perk Parasitism. However, as with just about any primeval fight, you'll want to avoid using primary weapons after Primeval Slayer ×2, and this gun is no exception. This principle also holds for a majority of bosses and strikes and raids, so it faces the issue of how often you're really going to be getting the most out of its new exotic perk. Thankfully, we get to keep both old perks, so this really doesn't take away from the weapon compared to the old Outbreak Prime. This gun seems to specialize most in clearing trash mobs and elites quickly, and acting as a solid kinetic to lean on when you've exhausted your special and heavy fighting a boss. I feel its lack of boss DPS is mostly due to how much high level or endgame PvE has changed since Destiny. There's far less leniency when it comes to DPSing a boss or bullet sponge, which means this gun falls under the solid but there are better options category when fighting anything that can't be quickly cleared out to make use of the nanites to bump its DPS. In a sense, it's a lot like Malfeasance at first, where it had something it was specifically good at, but outside of that there were just better options for the job without sacrificing an exotic slot on a kinetic weapon. Ultimately, I would still go for this gun knowing this, as it's not only one of the best looking weapons in the game, but it's incredibly useful for clearing out a lot of enemies fast, and once the catalyst is available for unlock, I feel this gun will really start to shine. Not only that, but 0 Hour is an incredibly fun mission, taking us back to the old tower, and I really do hope to see more like this. I will say that it does feel weaker than the original Outbreak Prime, but until that catalyst comes out, you really can't fairly judge that. Also, to this gun's credit, so far Glad and Chevy both have shown they feel this gun has a ton of promise to it, and when it comes to PvE work, they're very experienced. I would say that if you're strictly a PvP player, you could probably pass this weapon up, as it just simply can't compete with what's already available in Go Figure or Blast Furnace. Those are my thoughts on this weapon, and as with all thoughts on something, a lot of this is based on my opinion. I'm pretty sure people will disagree with me, and I really do want to hear what you have to say. Feel free to discuss it in the comments, as maybe I'm missing something. Also, I hope you can excuse my poor aiming, as my Razer Naga actually broke the night prior midstream, so I recorded all this footage using my cheap Acer mouse I borrowed from work. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe. Have a great night, everyone, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.